Welcome back to Goodie and JohnnyMo with the movies, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. This is going to be a fun episode. We get to talk about the movie Shazam. So this was opening weekend. John and I both saw it opening night on Friday, and I took my two sons to go see it yesterday. I'm looking forward to doing this review. This is episode 11.
Episode 11.
So pretty happy with that.
Yeah, we had a 1 week hiatus after our 10th episode, and now we're back for episode 11 and going strong.
There we go.
So I can tell you right now, there's a lot of movies lined up coming up. There's a lot of movies coming out.
So before we get started with that, we're going to do our little traditional drink.
Yep.
Johnny, what do you got?
Okay, so, well, no, you go first.
Okay, so this is Sam Adams. This is one of their Boston Ales, one of their seasonals.
I am drinking another Murphy's Irish Stout, but this time I'm drinking it in a Superman glass to provide a little controversy for the DC lawsuit versus Captain Marvel and Superman. Just a little sidebar about Murphy's Irish Stout. I think some people think that it's a Guinness wannabe, but however, what most people don't know is that Murphy's Irish Stout has been around since 1856. Coming out of Cork in Ireland, so a different county from Dublin. And even though they may be trying to copy Guinness, they've been doing it for over 150 years, and so they're doing something good. So Murphy's Irish Stout.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Quick shout out to friends and family of Goodie and JohnnyMo with the movies. Just want to give a quick shout out to my nieces, Maggie and Kira, who probably will never see this, but that's besides
their dad will.
Right, their dad will.
So, let's get going on Shazam.
Yeah. So, me and Chris saw this movie this past Friday night, which was opening weekend. So, just a little sidebar on that. Very interesting. Chris had talked to me earlier in the afternoon, or maybe even the previous day, and said that, he's got tickets for Shazam at Sayville Friday night at, 10 o'clock at night. I said, okay, great. As it turns out, Friday night, on my way home from work, I was stopping in Sayville to get some pizza to bring home. And I drove by the Sayville movie theater on Friday night, opening weekend of Shazam, and the marquee did not say Shazam. It said Captain Marvel. And I found that to be very interesting. So I drove home with my pizza and proceeded to explain to my wife and my stepdaughter how ironic that situation was, and they obviously had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, well, had they seen episode 9 and our little prelude into the Shazam preview, they would kind of understand the irony. So I proceeded to explain to them. But to me, sorry, coffee. I was beset by a myriad of possibilities. I was like, so as we know, the original. Before Shazam was Shazam, he was known as Captain Marvel. So I said to myself, and Captain Marvel and Shazam are both now playing in the movie theater. Time. So I had to call Chris and say, okay, is Shazam really playing at Captain Marvel? Did you make a mistake and accidentally buy tickets for Captain Marvel? And he said, no, he absolutely bought tickets for Shazam. So then I had to sit there and say, well, what are they doing with the marquee at the Sayville movie theater? Did they just forget to transfer Captain Marvel to Shazam? Or, oddly enough, being that the owners of the Sayville movie theater are kind of old-timers, did they do like a one-day delay to have Captain Marvel on the marquee while playing the Shazam movie? But either way, they did wind up changing it the next day. But at the end of the day, I found it very funny and interesting that Chris and I saw Shazam at the Sayville movie theater while the name Captain Marvel, and only Captain Marvel, was on the marquee.
Technically, it is correct.
Yes, that's the irony of
it.
It could have gone either way. It could have been an accident, and it could have been on purpose. And I just found the whole thing ironic, and naturally my wife and my stepdaughter thought, again, that we're completely insane to even recognize that. But that's the story for another day.
But, well, speaking of the name Captain Marvel, I was actually hoping that there was going to be somewhat of a mention of that name in this film. Unfortunately, we didn't hear that.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't quite expect that. I didn't think of that. But yeah, I would
just as like an homage or a nod.
I would be honest with
to the
you.
name of the character.
I would imagine that Marvel would have had issue with that.
I'm sure they probably would have. Well, especially because their character was having, again, their movie was released just a few weeks earlier. I could absolutely see that. But I was hoping to something. I loved all the different nicknames that Freddy was coming up for Shazam. I thought that was great. I mean, obviously, the Captain Sparklefingers that you hear on the trailer is probably the funniest one. What was the other one? Thundercrack.
There was a bunch.
I mean, Freddy came up with some really good ones.
But oddly enough, they didn't come up with the big cheese.
No,
and that was not mentioned.
I was hoping, when they had, at one point there's a montage of Freddy uploading YouTube videos. Yeah. By the way, spoilers again. Sorry, we should have said that at the very beginning.
If you haven't seen the movie, don't watch this because we're going to ruin everything.
Yes, we're going to talk about the 2 end credit scenes. That's right, 2.
That's our standard.
Yeah, so back to this. So, I was really hoping when Freddy was uploading all these YouTube videos, there's titles for each and every one. And I mean, they flash by real fast, but you could kind of read some of the titles.
Yeah, I think you could, but I think there was enough of them where
it was Red Whirlwind was another one.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to see them all in a first viewing. I think you would need to get the DVD or the Blu-ray, whatever,
and just freeze frame
it.
When I saw it the second time, though, I definitely was paying attention to that, and that was not on there. So that was unfortunate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Chris did wind up seeing it a second time. And that type of scenario reminds me of, I think, one of the original X-Men movies where I think Mystique had broken into somewhere, and she was on a computer, and all these file names came up, and there's multiple, well over a dozen, dozens of file names, and it's on the screen for a second, and if you're looking, you can read one or two, and it's ooh, but you really need to freeze frame it, and be able to read them all, because so many of those file names were Easter eggs, or not necessarily indications of things that were going to happen, but just things that were just there,
right?
Little subtle things.
But see, that's the hard part when this whole fun time that Freddy and Billy are trying to come up with a name for the character, and obviously the name is Shazam. He can never say his name.
Yes.
Whereas in the past, he used to say, "I'm Captain Marvel." He can no longer say, "My name is Shazam," because obviously that gives away the transformation,
right?
And other people have to call him that instead.
Right.
So it'll be interesting in the sequel and future films where Shazam is featured, if they come up with a way around that so that he can actually say some type of name, because he can't say it.
Well, I think what would have been funny is if somehow the other boy would have said something like, "What about Captain Marvel?"
Well, that's what I wanted.
And he would have said, "No, we can't use that. We can't say that."
Yeah,
to me that would have been
exactly,
fun. And I think they might have been able to get away with it.
I think so too. If they would have put it as a joke and it was a one-liner type thing. Yeah. I feel like Darla could have gotten away with that, because she's so innocent and sweet. If she would have came up with that name, that would have been. I thought that would have been funny.
Yeah. So a couple of things that they did in the film to kind of pay respect to the creators was obviously the high school that they're in is Fawcett High School, and Fawcett was the original comic book company that had created Captain Marvel. And the other thing that they did was Billy Batson's mother. Her name was C.C. Batson, which was an homage to.
Oh no, the father was C.C. Batson.
Oh,
the mother was Marilyn.
Oh, I must have misheard that.
Yeah,
but
the father was.
One of the parents was named C.C. Batson, and that's an homage to the original creator of Captain Marvel, which was C.C. Beck. So I thought that was kind of good.
Yeah. And
the one thing that we did notice at the end of the movie during the credits is when they did their special thanks to. It actually was a very, very short list.
Yeah, 3 names.
3 names, which is very uncommon for any of these types of films. Because, I mean, not for nothing, you're talking about a character who has been around since, I believe, almost 1940.
Yeah.
I believe, most of the 40 stuff, the biggest names would probably be C.C. Beck and maybe Matt Grabwood. But, when it went to D.C., I mean, Shazam went to D.C., I believe in the late 60s or early 70s.
I think the 60s, I think you're right.
And has been, with various artists and writers, had his own. There was a Shazam comic book series in the late 60s and early 70s.
But I think because this was like more based on the New 52 version.
Oh, is that what it was?
I think because it was based more because, like I said, there's no once the New 52 hit and Shazam had that comic that came out, it was only Shazam. There was no Captain Marvel.
Okay, and I didn't really read that, so I didn't know what.
I think that's why, but still kind of surprising that they
limited to only 3 names. Because again, like I said, Shazam was to me, I think, a big character. In Kingdom Come.
Well, that was my first experience with Shazam was in Kingdom Come.
Yeah,
when I saw that,
and he was. And it was.
I mean, he's
Alex
great
Ross's
in that.
Kingdom Come was just amazing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but I mean, I would imagine that even since the New 52, I would imagine that there still have been other artists and writers associated with that character. So I mean, we take a lot of interest in looking at that section in the credits because usually there's a whole array of names, and you kind of look at it and you go, oh, that's so and so. Who was involved in the character from this decade and that decade and going down. And so for a character that's been around for this long, literally to see only 3 names.
I would have liked to have seen
I was
more names.
very, very surprised. And I attribute that more to, I think, an oversight.
I mean, I would think so. I wouldn't. Obviously, that's not something that's done on purpose. I agree with you.
I mean, not for nothing. How many special thanks names were in the Captain Marvel movie? 30.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Well, even like the Aquaman film, even like if we're sticking with just DC and talking about the previous DC films, the Wonder Woman film, and of course, Man of Steel. If we're talking about the single characters, no team ups, there are a ton of mentions of names of people. But for this one to only have 3 was a little surprising. Yeah.
I mean, granted, I did know all 3 names, but still, it was like I was like, wow, that's it. So anyhow, so jumping to.
It was a
the
good start.
Of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it opens up with Savannah as a kid, and I thought the interesting part is that he initially is, what would you want to say? I don't know if you want to say selected, chosen, because he doesn't really make it, but the wizard brings him in. Yeah,
they don't exactly explain the criteria as to how people were brought in.
It's just people that could be pure of heart.
I mean, in all honesty, I would like to think that the wizard wasn't drawing them in randomly.
No, I think there was a pattern to how they did it.
Because they actually showed when Billy Batson was pulled into the realm.
Yep.
It was after he had done something very selfless,
correct,
and heroic.
Yeah, when he saves Freddy from, if you've seen the trailer, and when Billy saves Freddy from the 2 bullies, basically. This part of the film kind of plays out like the trailer. You see Billy running away. He slides down into the subway, gets on the train. The next thing you know, the train doors pretty much open up, and he's at the Rock of Eternity.
Oh, is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's where the Shazam. That's where the wizard
is. Okay, because they didn't notice that.
I don't know if you found this funny, but the second time I saw the film, I caught this a lot more. So the wizard Shazam, every time we open up to him, where we see him, he's asleep in the chair. And I don't know if that was done intentionally because he's like older. I don't know if this was done as a joke. But when Savannah goes in for the first time, the wizard's sleeping. Okay. When Billy goes in, he's sleeping.
I did not notice that, but that does not surprise me one bit. So this is the most important thing I want to put out for this film. This film is very comedic.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to say satirical. But it's very tongue-in-cheek. It's not so serious.
If you want to compare this film to the other DC films that have come out, we're talking since Man of Steel for the continuity of the new DC films that they have going. This is the most lightest in tone, and most comedic out of all of them, and like John said, tongue in cheek.
Yeah, and without a doubt. And I think it was meant to be that way because I believe that the original Captain Marvel character, like being known as the Big Cheese, he was a little.
It's in the name.
He's a hammy character.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is there's that vein to it. It's not this hardcore Batman
he's not brooding or anything like that.
And that's the time, and they adapted that into the movie. So if you're looking for a complete logical, realistic scenario. I don't think you're going to find that here. And I don't think, and that's okay, because
but that wouldn't have worked.
Was their intent.
And I don't think that would have worked.
No, I don't think it would have worked.
No.
However, it does take place in the
DC universe.
I'm going to say the DC cinematic universe.
Well, I hate that. If they didn't call, I mean, well, it's never, as far as I know, it's never been officially called that by DC. People have kind of just dubbed it that. I would have just called it DC Films.
Yeah, but it does take place in the continuity of the more recent DC films. Whereas,
correct.
But Marvel's movies, it's obvious that they're
it's all MCU. It's all connected. Well, just with the turmoil, and everything that's kind of gone on, it's. I think there was a lot of questions whether this film was going to take place in the DC universe, but with the success of Aquaman, but plus also that this film was already filmed by the time Aquaman came out. Aquaman was a huge success, crossing $1 billion. This film so far has seemed to do fairly well. The budget for this film was under $100 million. I think it was around like 70 or 80 million for this film, and I think it opened up to I think this opening weekend domestic did like 55 million. Internationally, it did over 100 plus.
Sure. So I think it's definitely going to make its money.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, listen, this is not going to be $1 billion film, and I want to say this too. Not every film needs to be $1 billion. Unfortunately, I think there's people nowadays that think that these huge blockbusters, the $1 billion is the threshold, or that's the make or break. If it doesn't make $1 billion, it's a bust.
And I mean, that's an insane way to think of it.
I absolutely agree. Not every film needs to make that. Some of these larger blockbusters, yes, the goal for the studio is to make probably $1 billion now. That's becoming
but you got to realize
standard for some of them.
That you're expecting that type of scenario with your biggest foot forward.
Right.
You're talking about
an Endgame,
your Star Wars
War,
films,
right?
Your Avengers Endgame.
Aquaman was not
even like a Batman or a Superman film.
I mean, your big marquees. A movie like Aquaman was not. They did not think that film was going to cross $1 billion. There's no way the executives thought that was going to happen.
I mean, people. When I say people, I'm talking about everybody, especially the studios. They need to put these things in perspective and realize that every movie is not going to make as much movie as the movie that has made the most money ever. Yeah.
And
it's not going to happen. You have to set your expectations at a realistic level, and if you exceed that, great. Because in all honesty, you never know what the America or the world, the audience is going to, run to or cling to.
Absolutely.
Because not for nothing, you have these movies with enormous budgets that tank.
Yep.
Because they think that people are going to see them, and they don't.
Yep.
And in the same vein, they think people are going to see these movies, and then they do.
And they overperform.
Right. There's no, it's not a scientific formula as much as only because it's the human factor is that random element.
Yep. And sometimes that's hard to judge, and sometimes you roll the dice and you wait and see. I think DC got a win with this. So for me, that's 2 in a row between Aquaman and Shazam.
Oh yeah, no, I think so too. And
I think people are really going to gravitate towards this film. Yesterday I brought my 2 kids. This movie's PG-13. There's definitely some slight language in this film, and as far as tone goes, the majority of it overall is they try to be more tongue-in-cheek and lighthearted. But one scene in particular, it is a little more scary and serious, is when they go into this boardroom where Savannah, the main villain, at this point in time, he's gone back and he's defeated the wizard, and he's taken the 7 deadly sins with him. So he's pretty powerful at this point. Walks into the boardroom, takes his brother, who's been a jerk to him his whole life, throws him out the window.
And they're in a skyscraper.
Yes.
And so he's falling
to his death.
Hundreds of feet above the ground.
And then after that, he releases the 7 deadly sins
and starts rampaging and killing everybody in the room.
I mean, at one point, one of the 7 deadly sins takes a guy, puts him up on the table, and literally bites his head off. Yeah. You don't see that part. The camera pans away. But the act of it happening, you see it up until that point.
It is definitely implied.
Yes.
To me, that is the one scene in the movie that is out of sync with the rest of the film. Because to me, it is so overly violent. I think, even Chris even told me, like, when, his youngest son was in the film, he said, I'm gonna shield your eyes.
I told him beforehand when we went into this, like, there's a scene you're not gonna like.
One scene.
And I covered his eyes for that, and, after that, everything else was fine, but, for that one scene, I felt like I really didn't want him to see that part.
For the entire movie, it has a certain feel to it, except for that one scene. And that scene is definitely more violent and vicious than almost almost any scene in almost any of these recent superhero films. Like, even like if you look at Avengers Infinity War, where Thanos has got Loki, by the neck and snaps his neck. Like, that's nowhere near as violent and vicious and terrifying as this film.
But I think that also went to just show the lengths of which Savannah was going to. Savannah in the comics he's a pretty smart guy, and he's pretty driven. And I think in this film it really shows that. The one thing that I felt that this film kind of lacked is there's a huge time jump. So we kind of went on a tangent. So when Savannah gets brought in front of the Wizard presents him with the option of being his champion, but Savannah starts hearing voices in his head and gets called over to the eye of the 7 deadly sins. And he's almost about to grab it. And then the Wizard Shazam zaps him and says, "You're not worthy," and throws him out. And that's when Savannah starts to have this obsession with, why am I not worthy?
Yeah.
And that drives him for pretty much his whole young life into being an adult.
Which also... Now, okay, so like I said, there are certain parts of this film that, like, the strain of credibility in terms of story dynamics. I give it a lot of leeway because of the type of film it is, but there are certain parts of this film that do bring up certain logics or illogics into question. So to me, one of the things that I was like, just kind of, how old do you feel he was when he was...
Savannah?
Yeah, in the car.
In the car, I'm going to say 10. I would say 10, 11 years old, I would say.
Okay, yeah. So you have a 10-year-old kid who has this experience, and it doesn't really go his way. He gets kind of thrown back into reality. And now, like, you're supposed to accept that as a 10-year-old who's in basically, 5th grade at the time, he's going to hold on to this idea as a child and carry it with him through adolescence, through adulthood, to the point where he can get to a point where he could even has the ability to research this phenomenon.
Right.
Well, this is something that he couldn't do at the age of 11, where I'm going to figure out what's going on and go all over the world and this happened when he was 10.
But I think this goes to show Savannah's drive and obsession with power. And that's the whole point, is power. And at the end of so when Savannah goes back into reality, there's an automobile accident where his father gets injured, his father and his brother are jerks.
Complete jerks
to him. So you can pretty much see that that's pretty much the life that he led growing into adulthood. But the magic 8-ball that he has, when it stops rolling and he looks at it after the accident, the 7 deadly sins leave him that message that says, find us.
I mean, I get that, but I just feel that if he was older and more closer to an adult age and more closer to a professional age, where he could actually act upon these impulses, I think it would have made more sense.
Yeah.
Because he was very young, and I honestly feel that...
You think it would have blown over? For most kids?
It would have blown over. He would have gotten over it. And it slowly would have faded over time. He wouldn't have completely erased the memory, but it wouldn't have been a prime motivating factor for things that he did as an adult. So,
possible.
So to me, logically, I think it would have made more sense if he was closer
to 15, 16, like a teen, late teenage years.
Yeah. Even then, you could have argued, but it would have been less of an argument. Again, I think it would have made more sense if he was at least anywhere between 5 to 10 years older than he was, and then those would have put impulses in him that he could have realistically acted upon. Because otherwise, you're sitting there. He's basically been fiending about this for the last 40 years. You know, starting from when he was.
Well, we don't really know how old Savannah is at this point in time. But
I thought there was an age.
No, it just basically jumps to today. It doesn't give you a year. It doesn't give you like a time. You know, time wise.
I thought it did.
No, it never gives you a year.
Okay.
So,
but even still, I mean, Mark Strong is not a young guy.
No, but the character he's playing, I think, is younger. Like, if I had to guess, I would say Savannah's probably playing someone in his like late 30s, early 40s, most likely.
At the very least. Yeah.
But you're probably thinking that it's probably been at least between 25 and 30 years.
Easily
is my guess.
Yeah.
For all this,
I'm gonna have to go back to that at some point because I thought they did have a year in there.
One shout out I want to give to is I love John Glover. If you guys know who he is, he played Lionel Luthor in the Smallville series for 10 seasons. I love him. So the fact that he was in this film makes he plays Savannah's father. That's John Glover.
Oh, okay.
So I think he's a great actor. I was so happy that he was in this film. So that was a little sidebar.
That's funny.
But
so just to talk a little bit about Mark Strong, I think it is actually kind of interesting how certain character actors just keep getting pulled into different movies.
But I think because he is such a good actor. I mean, Mark Strong was fantastic in Kick-Ass.
Right.
And he was one of the only good parts in the Green Lantern.
He might be the only redeeming quality of the Green Lantern, in all honesty.
The only thing that was the one thing I was very upset with when they didn't go forward with the Green Lantern sequel is I wanted to see Mark Strong as Sinestro.
Oh yeah.
With the fear ring going forward. So obviously we're never getting that.
Yeah, because the way the original Green Lantern movie ended was in that direction.
Yes.
That Sinestro,
and that was the little after credit scene where he gets the yellow ring.
So maybe DC learned their lesson with that one to not, if you're gonna do a great character like Green Lantern, do it semi-right.
Yeah. Oh no,
to ensure that you can do the sequel because they did it horribly.
Yeah, that was not done right at all. But we don't want to. I'm not going to sidetrack on that. That could be a whole other conversation of failed comic book films.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
But Mark Strong was great. Zachary Levi as Shazam is fantastic. I thought there was a really interesting dynamic between
that's the adult Shazam.
Zachary Levi plays the adult Shazam, and
then
Billy.
What other movies has he been in? Because you knew him going into the
Zachary
film.
Levi.
I have no idea.
He was in a long ongoing television series. The name's slipping me right now, but I mean he's been in some other things before, but this is definitely role? This has to be his biggest role to date, as far as notoriety.
Now, one of the things. And I noticed this in the preview too. The only one of, and maybe it's just me, but I just felt that the way Zachary Levi filled the Shazam suit, I felt that from a visual perspective, that the suit was one size larger than his body.
I don't know if that was done intentionally. But I mean, the suit is obviously padded. But But Zachary Levi has put out videos of him working out throughout the training process, similarly to the way that other actors have for larger roles. The way that Chris Hemsworth has, showed himself when he was working out for Thor, for Henry Cavill when he was working out for Superman. Zachary Levi has done the same thing. So his suit, though, obviously was padded. It was kind of shaped a little bit towards him, but it was also padded a little bit. And I don't know if it makes sense because it almost looks like in the comic where his suit looks like it's slightly bigger than like his head. I don't know if they were going for that or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But I liked how when you first see the costume and he's on the subway, all these people start commenting on it. Like it's like that's there was like an ongoing joke about the costume. Even one of his foster brothers at the dinner table makes a comment about how the suit is stupid. and then Billy's at the table. He's like, well, maybe he didn't have a choice in what the costume was. It was just given to him.
I mean, not for nothing. I mean, the costume design literally comes from the 1940s characterization of the character. And you got to realize in 1940, the superhero comic book genre was unbelievable.
Circus strongmen.
Yeah, it was, they didn't have much to go on. Yeah. When Captain Marvel came out in 1940, there was only a handful superheroes. You know, I mean,
Right.
you know, you had Superman and Batman. You know, and from on the Marvel side, you like, you know, you had Captain America,
Submariner,
Torch, and
or no?
Submariner.
Yeah.
But like, there wasn't much to go on, so everything was very much, you know, larger than life caricature. You know, so yeah, I mean, it is. You know, and the funny thing I think about his cape is like the way his cape sits on his body. It's almost like it's elevated up over his shoulder.
Yeah. Well, because it's a hood too.
Yeah.
And no other cape in the superhero films has that except his.
Yeah. So it does have a slight. It definitely has a slightly different, you know, measurement scenario.
Yes.
Of how a costume sits on somebody's body than most other superheroes.
Yep.
So, but I think that might be in line with the original design of the character.
You know,
so
one of the things I wanted to go back to was the difference is when Zachary Levi is playing Shazam, and then when Asher is playing Billy Batson. When we get introduced to Billy, he's looking for his mom. He's looking for his birth mother, and that drive actually plays out through the entire film.
Yeah.
He never loses sight of that.
Yeah.
Where he's looking for his mom.
And I did anticipate that there would be some resolution to that towards the end of the film. And there was.
There was, but it's not a satisfying resolution.
No. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, the mother really turns out to be, you know, a piece of, you know, dude.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost depressing.
Yep.
Because she's like, you know, basically she lost him at the carnival and went looking for him and saw that he was the police and decided to just leave him. You know,
I figured that he would be better off with the police than now.
Yeah.
She prefaces it when Billy finally confronts his mother when he finds her. She basically tells him, you know, that she was 17 years old.
Right.
Her father had thrown her out. She didn't really have anyone to help support her because the father wasn't around. So she felt that the police would be able to better take care of her.
And I understand that perspective from her when she was 17. It was like she was in a really bad place, a really bad time, under really bad circumstances. And this looked like an easy way out. And almost like, you know, it was a way to get her off the hook. He was gonna
land on his feet, and she assumes that. Like, she sees him and she looks at him and sees him and is like, "Oh, you look okay. Like, you look like you've landed on your feet."
But now
not
it's like,
knowing what he's really gone through over the last 10, 11 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say now it's about anywhere from 10 to 12 years later,
most likely.
And she is almost like has almost no regret about what she did. And basically, like, isn't really happy to see him.
No,
and
she even says to him that this isn't really a good time.
Yeah, like, and doesn't really want him to interfere with her current life, which is probably like, you know, not that good.
It seems like her boyfriend's a piece of crap. I mean, he's yelling in the background that you can hear. I mean, I'm wondering if this is going to play out in the second film.
Yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if is this a one and done scene?
I think it's a one and done.
You know, or maybe she comes looking for him because he gives her the compass and says,
and you know what, and when he gives it to her, she doesn't even know what it is.
At first, it doesn't look that way, but afterwards, when you see her in the background as he's walking away from her, you can see how upset she starts to get when she does. Like, look at it. You know, I think you're right. I think at first when she looks at it, she's like, what is this? And then I think it does hit her as he's walking away.
You know, so I mean, one thing you got to realize is, you know, like, he shows up at her door unannounced.
Yes.
So people put in that situation, they're not expecting it. They don't know what to do, so they might just go to their default.
They might just shut down. They just might shut down. Yeah. No. I get that.
It's not completely. I mean, and
it's not like you called ahead of time and said, "Hey, Mom, I found you. I'm coming over."
So, I mean, one of the logistical problems I had with the film, which I thought was a little bit of a stretch, is basically, you know, when Billy Batson is a kid, he gets lost at this carnival, and the cops have him, and, you know, they say, like, well, she never went looking for him, so they were never able to reunite him with his family, and that, to me, I found very, very hard to believe. You know, cops find this kid at a carnival. You know, the next step isn't, well, drop him in the foster home. You know, I mean, it's like,
right.
You know, you can find out where this kid lives and who his parents are. You know, he has a name. You know, his parents have a name.
But she didn't go by her maiden. She didn't go by the last name, her maiden name. That was the father. They say so when the kids.
But I mean, this kid's got to know where he lives.
He doesn't. But you got to remember too. Like he's probably in the scene. He's probably
and
4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. I would say.
I would have thought
max.
5.
I'm going to say 5 max. Now, 5 is kindergarten, where kids are basically learning their address. So he might not have known where he lived. Not to mention, it sounded like from her, the father kicked her out, so I don't know where they lived.
Yeah.
And it ends up that one of Billy's foster brothers finds where his mother lives. So, but they said the reason why you couldn't find her was because she was under her maiden name, not under Batson. So he probably doesn't know that, you know, what her other name was.
Yeah.
But he didn't even know what her first name was.
In all honesty, I think one of the other, you know, strains and logic here is how the foster brother was able to figure this all out in one afternoon. Like they got the book, and it's
yeah.
And it's like, I'm like, all right, that's
yep.
You know, this kid's been looking for his mother his whole life.
Well, he gets an F
and has a whole list of names, and all of a sudden this kid's like, oh, well, you're missing that one.
Well, it's kind of funny because he gets an F on a math test, but yet has enough computer skills and is computer savvy that can find his mom.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I thought that was kind of interesting.
So again, I mean, I just found it hard to believe that, like, you know, any kid separated from his parent at a fair, you know, at the age of 5. I'm not talking about a baby in a carriage. I'm talking about a 5-year-old kid. All of a sudden, the cops, they just can't figure it out.
Yeah.
We can't figure it out, and you're going into the foster care.
Yeah.
To me, I just found that a little bit of a strain. But again, like you said, you know, because of the type of the film, I think a lot of the story points are very broad strokes.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
So
and you kind of just made to, like, again, this is like just you're going along for the story.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I give the story a lot of leeway, but I do have to point out the parts where it's like I feel like they're just straining a little bit.
I did like when Billy gets to the foster home though, and he gets introduced to all the different kids that we meet,
which is, you know, again, a whole smorgasbord of
yeah, like different personalities, like everything's like kind of
different nationalities,
yep, all like spread out.
Because one of the things we talked about was, you know, like the original Captain Marvel from the comic books had an extended family.
Yes,
there was Mary Marvel, and again, I didn't read any of these comics from the 40s, even whether they were original or reprints. You know, I don't know the connections too much, but I know there was a Mary Marvel. There was a Captain Marvel Jr.
No, that was Freddie. Was that Freddie Freeman or no? Freddie Freeman came in, or did he come in later, Freddie?
I don't even know the names of the characters from the comics. You know, but there was a Mary Marvel, Captain Marvel Jr. There was an Uncle Marvel, and I even think there was a dog. You know, so there was a whole Marvel family.
Which they can't use that name anymore.
Yeah, there was a whole Marvel family.
But they have all these characters.
So they have, now that they have all these other guys.
Yeah.
And it's basically his foster siblings, of which I think there are 5.
Yes.
You know, so you have
there was Darla, who was the little girl, and Darla was probably one of the greatest.
My favorite character in the film.
She was fantastic, and this is the girl that's she's one of the daughters on the show This Is Us. Her real name is slipping my mind, but she's
in This Is Us?
She's in This Is Us. She's the little sister.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, she's the little sister.
See, my wife watches that show.
So she was one of the most touching characters in the whole show.
Yeah, she had some really, really good, innocent lines. You could emotionally, you could connect with the innocence of this character.
Absolutely.
Because she actually plays this character very flawlessly. It's very convincing.
Absolutely.
The emotion that she brings to a character. Whereas I think some of the other characters are just a little bit more, you know, on the surface. But I think she has some of the more endearing moments and lines, and some of the more comical.
Yeah. I think so too. But she was one of my favorites. And then we get introduced to Mary, who's looks to be the oldest sister.
Yeah, one of the parts. Well, let's go through the rest of the families. Because I don't remember the names, but I
remember the names either.
Then there were at least. Well, then there was
a little brother who was playing video games.
The Asian kid.
And then there was the older brother who didn't really speak too much.
I think
he kind of just like grunted.
I think he might have been Spanish.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. And then we got to Freddy,
the friend. Well, no, maybe
Freddy was the brother too.
He was the.
He had a crutch.
Yeah, he actually had one of the funniest lines of the film when he was like talking to himself, and they were like, "Oh, why don't you go run after him?"
Oh yeah, he's in there like washing dishes.
Yeah, that was actually.
Freddy, why don't you go run after him? Very funny.
Yeah, you guys are funny. He was actually really funny.
I mean, now the kid that plays Freddy. Oh my God, Grazer, I forget his name too. But this was one of the kids that was in the movie It. And he
was in It?
Yeah. He's in it. Yeah. Oh man. This kid, he is such a good
character
actor. He's the one whose mom is the OCD about being clean and not hurting yourself.
Oh, okay.
So
oh, that's funny. I didn't realize.
Yeah. Oh man, he's great. He's so good. I mean, you could definitely see such a good relationship between Billy and Freddy, and how well these guys get along. Together, and even believe it or not, even Freddy and Gwen with Zachary Levi as Shazam, those two guys even had such a good working, believable chemistry when they were on screen together. But Freddy's this superhero fanatic. He's got in every scene that he's in, he's wearing a superhero T-shirt, and I find that to be really funny too. Is that the real world has implemented.
I did not notice that.
Every single scene Freddy's in, he's wearing a different character.
Okay, hold that thought. Okay, and so now we're back. Okay, so
Freddy is wearing different superhero T-shirts throughout the entire film.
Give me any 3 examples. What superhero shirts is he wearing? I literally can't think of one. So I missed that completely.
So in I can't remember what shirt he's wearing when we first meet him, but I think the first day at school he's wearing this orange shirt, but it's got the Batman emblem on it.
Okay.
At another point, obviously he wears a Superman shirt. He's got the Superman backpack on. There's a girl in multiple scenes that's at the school that has a Batman backpack. Mm-hmm. And towards the end of the movie, Freddy wears a Wonder Woman shirt. And the very last scene where he's in the cafeteria sitting down by himself, it's the WW, and it's got her sword that's going through it.
Okay, that's really funny. I think that's one of those things where, when the windshield wipers are on for a long time, you just don't see them anymore.
Oh, man.
I didn't see any
I just love that in their world, it's incorporated that, obviously where they're acknowledging that the superheroes now, that they have merchandise. There's one point where Shazam is fighting Savannah for the first time, and they go in through this department store when they're in this mall, and Shazam is taking this huge Batman, but the best part when he throws it at him, goes, "I'm Batman," as he's throwing it at him.
That's funny.
I thought that was funny. And there's there's a Superman thing in the background. There's the DC Imaginext, all the real world's memorabilia and merchandise is in this film.
Okay, so I think one of the most interesting parts of this film, for me, was the incorporation of an item of memorabilia that would never be part of this world. The certified bullet.
Yeah, the certified bullet that bounced off
that's collapsed and bounced off Superman's chest. So this is a bullet that has been shot at Superman, and it bounced off his chest, and it's been certified by someone.
Right.
And that's actually really, I don't know. I think that's really interesting because I think it's hysterical. I think it's hysterical. But I could see myself owning something stupid like that.
Absolutely,
without a doubt.
I mean, Freddy has the bullet. Freddy has a replica batarang. Well, it's funny because he talks about oh yeah, that's a batarang. It's a replica, but it's exactly it's a batarang.
It's authentic.
It's authentic, yeah. So it's an authentic replica batarang. So I mean, all these funny things that as fans of the genre and these characters, I think we could all appreciate and fall in love with Freddy's love of those characters.
Yeah.
But Freddy has an injury. You know, Freddy has. He doesn't actually say what his condition is.
No,
why he's got a loft strand crutch.
Actually, no, he doesn't at all.
And he's using a loft strand crutch. I believe he's actually using a loft strand crutch. So a typical crutch goes underneath the armpit. A loft strand crutch, uses the forearm and it kind of pushes. He's got the little ring around it. I actually believe he's using that incorrectly. Actually,
that's funny.
So that's a little frustrating as someone in the medical field.
Well, incidentally, what sucks for his character is that the bullet that he had, that Billy Batson actually stole and eventually admits to stealing it.
He tries to give it back to him to prove that he's Billy.
Drops it in the grave, and they never get it back. They never get it back. And I'm like, I would freaking kill him.
But in one of the next scenes, one of the best things happen is that the scene in the trailer when those two crooks come in to rob the department store, they finally find out that Shazam's bulletproof. Mm-hmm. And this, I thought, was one of the funniest things because what do kids do nowadays when things happen? They whip out their phone and take a video.
Phones, yeah.
Freddy takes out his phone and starts recording the robbery as it's happening.
Telling them to shoot him in the face.
First he's like... Well, first they shoot Billy, and they shoot Shazam, and they find out that he's bulletproof, and they're all excited. And then Freddy comes up with the idea of well, we don't know if it's the suit or
your skin.
Shoot him in the face. So Shazam hands him back the gun and says, yeah, shoot me. I'll tell you, that had me laughing.
I tell you, it does definitely explore. I'll say, if you remember, like some of the earlier Spider-Man films, where I think Tobey Maguire is trying to, flesh out his powers and test things. This kind of takes that idea and goes further.
I think this film does.
And not too many films have been able to do that further than what most other films do, which is literally just a guy trying to figure out what he can do.
Yeah. I think this film does two things very, very well. One, we see the transgression of Shazam from not knowing how to do anything to learning his full potential towards the end of the film.
I don't even know if he's learned his full potential, to be honest with you.
You know what? You're probably right, but has learned enough that he knows how to handle it
without getting himself killed.
Right. So, I mean, I think that does that pretty well, or at least the believability of like a new character, like you said, like not understanding anything about his characters and his abilities, and then testing it out.
Yeah.
And the second thing is we have to remember that Shazam is not even 15 years old, so. I think this film does a really good job of, if you're a teenager and you're that age, and this is one of the things that Freddy sees, is what would you do with superpowers at that age? How would you act? What would you do? Would you actually step up and be a hero, or would you be a guy taking selfies for money?
Right, and most likely you'd probably be either taking selfies for money or figuring out a way to steal money.
Right. and that's the one thing that, I mean, these guys have their fun, but at some point it comes to a reality where Freddy gets really upset and has this heart-to-heart conversation with Shazam after he saves the bus, and he's like, because Shazam at one point is basically like telling Freddy, he's like, you just want me around because I'm a superhero and I can make you look cool. And Freddy was like, no, Does, like, I would kill to have what you have. Oh, that's what Shazam says to him. You just want what I have.
Yeah.
And Freddy's like, of course I would. He's like, look at me. He's like, nobody pays attention to me. And that conversation was it just seemed so real and authentic.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they are still both kids with standard kid
problems,
immaturities.
Yeah.
And it definitely, so I mean, the way, you basically have a 15-year-old kid inhabiting an adult body of a superhero. It definitely is a parallel to the movie Big.
Absolutely. And I think we saw that from the first trailer. Yeah. And they do an homage to that.
I was going to say, we have to mention this. They do an homage to that.
This is one. I love this film. I love the movie Big. So in the mall scene when Savannah is fighting Shazam, all of a sudden they're in this toy store, and towards the end of that fight, Shazam steps on a piano, a musical piano that's very similar to the one in Big.
The floor piano.
The floor piano. Yeah. So he's stepping on the notes. No, they're not playing chopsticks or anything like that, but they're definitely...
That would have been a little...
That would have been over the top. But the fact that they're just stepping on a floor piano is just a huge homage. I mean, we all knew that
that's an obvious... That's an obvious homage to Big, and you know what? And that's okay.
That was. I think it was perfectly well played how they did.
Yeah, it was done very subtle, and it was
quick.
It was very
yeah,
fast.
It was a quick
they didn't belabor the point. They didn't hover over it for such a long time.
And whenever we see Easter eggs in the film, John and I are usually like tapping one another like, hey, did you see that? You see that?
And not for nothing. That actually is there were actually people. Now, okay, when did Big come out? 88?
88, I think, yeah.
Okay, so how many years ago was that?
31 years ago.
30 years ago, Yeah. So like me and Chris take these homages for granted. Oh yeah, that was an homage to Big. But okay, the Big is 30 years old.
Oh, there was a ton of people that went to this and had no idea what
people today, people going to the movies today, a typical teenager going to the movies today, that movie Big came out 15 years before they were even born.
Yep.
So and unfortunately, what is very typical of people today is that they know nothing about anything older than them.
Yeah.
So it's like, we can appreciate
we
can appreciate these things, and some people can't, but maybe they just don't even realize it. But not for nothing, if you've never seen the film Big, go see it.
It's a
rent
film.
it. Watch it.
Well, let's put it this way: if you enjoyed this film has a lot of parallels, like John was saying, to that original film. So if you enjoyed it, you should go back and watch Big. I mean, it's basically this film without the superpowers.
Yeah. Because you're going to have people that sit there and say, oh, what am I going to see this film Big for? I don't even know anybody's in it. Well, you do. Tom Hanks is in it.
That's a reason enough alone to go see the film.
It's a iconic Tom Hanks film. And Tom Hanks is still big today. So even people that have never seen it, if you like, and you've probably seen Tom Hanks films in the past 10 years, and you probably like him, go see one of his older films, and that actually is a really.
But I mean, this film from the very first trailer sold me on the idea that this movie was going to be big with a superhero. Mm-hmm. And John and I have talked about this before, and he knows that about me. When I first saw this trailer, I was like, and I told him this, this is exactly what it looks like. I'm very excited because I love the movie Big.
Well, you are actually also a big Tom Hanks fan.
And I'm a big Tom Hanks fan. Absolutely,
I know he's one
of my tops. Absolutely, and just seeing how this movie transpired, I really, really enjoyed this. I thought this film did a really good job of showcasing when Freddie had almost, and it was like different relationships when it was Billy the Kid, and then it was Shazam. Mm-hmm. And when he had that relationship with Shazam, it's like an adult. And he even says to him at one point, he's like, "I can't talk to you when you're like this," because he's not like having a conversation with his friend. It's like he's having a conversation with someone that's different.
Well, I mean, this is also one of the interesting dynamics of a film like this. Is basically you have two different actors playing the same role.
Yep.
So it's really hard, I think, from not necessarily from a story standpoint, because the writer is basically whoever's writing the story, the screenplay, is writing the same role. But what you have is you
have to get the actors in the same mindset.
Right. You have to have the actors in the same mindset, and you have to have a director who's in charge of that scenario. Making sure that everything is kind of gelling consistently. Yeah. And you had the same problem. You didn't necessarily have the same problem with Big, because for most of the movie, Big is Tom Hanks.
Yes.
There's not a back and forth.
But this movie, because he can transform,
he's going back and forth. So you have the two different actors constantly back and forth. I think, just as a little sidebar, I think one of the hardest scenarios like that to wrap your head around would have been in the movie Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta.
Yep, playing two different characters.
They start off playing two different characters, and then they start playing each other. Opposite wise. So
that's a good film too, by the way. If you haven't seen that, that film helped relaunch John Travolta
after Pulp Fiction relaunched him.
That's true. I'm sorry.
Relaunched John.
Sorry, you're correct. I forgot Pulp Fiction came out before Face Off. Yes.
Relaunch. That's funny.
But when we get to, it's like when Billy's with Freddie, it's like they got small kid problems, and then when you have Shazam come in, he starts to have these larger problems because Billy is trying to basically he doesn't believe at first he needs a family to live. And his whole story arc is learning that he does need this family to survive and to live, and that they need him. Shazam is trying to find his place once he gets these powers and basically figure out what he's supposed to do. And I think that story, it's like the same character has two different story arcs going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Which you don't really get to see in a lot of films. So it was interesting how they both kind of like came around and hit that point towards the end of this movie. Mm-hmm. We get to see bits and pieces of Savannah throughout this whole thing until it really culminates to the end, where Savannah basically captures Freddy and forces him to go back to the house with all the other foster kids. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he lures Shazam in, and we go to the carnival. Now, there's a really funny character that makes an appearance in this film.
In a couple spots.
In a couple spots that we have to talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, in this movie, they get a fake Santa Claus to be in this film.
Right. Who basically is just being hired to fulfill the
role
of Santa Claus.
Of a Santa Claus in a
department
various
scenarios, whether it's in the department store or at the carnival.
And and it's just so funny how Santa, this fake Santa Claus puts this girl on his knee. He's like, okay, he's like, they start talking. And he says to him, well, like, I'm always around. I'll always be here for you. And then the floor erupts in front of him. He drops the girl and leaves, runs away. And then something very similarly happens in the carnival, where when the fight starts to happen there, he jets out and just starts running.
And then they wind up interviewing him at some point on the news, and he's cursing up a storm.
Yeah, I mean, he's bleeping out F-bombs the whole time.
So, to me, actually, I think to me, my favorite, funniest part of the movie is when Darla, as a Shazam type superhero, is at the carnival, and she happens to be next to Santa. And she kind of tells him, she goes, my name is Darla, and I've been really good this year. Yeah, and that to me was like very unexpected.
Yeah.
But when it hit, like, you realize what she's doing, because she's
probably
as
like
a superhero.
She's probably 6 or 7 years old.
But as a superhero, she looks like she's an adult,
and she's right.
But she still is the character of a 6-year-old.
Yeah, and that was just so cute.
I thought that to me was my absolute favorite line of the film. I really enjoyed that.
So when we get to the final fight, you've got Savannah starts to unleash all of the 7 deadly sins upon the carnival to take on Shazam, and then he has his foster brothers and sisters with him, and they start to figure out that Savannah gets weakened when the 7 deadly sins are away from him, when he's not containing all of them within his body. Mm-hmm. They found that out when they were in the Rock of Eternity. And one of them throws a batarang at him when he's not looking, and it cuts the back of his head.
Yeah.
And Zachary Levi even sees it also. So they start to figure things out a little bit. And then at one point, Savannah's whole goal is to get the powers of Shazam within him. So if he were to have the 7 deadly sins and the powers of Shazam within him, I mean,
he would probably be unstoppable.
That might make him unstoppable.
Yeah. No, but one thing I did find a little, I don't want to say odd with the film, but okay, so the 7 deadly sins, I'm not going to go through them all. You got gluttony and lust and envy. But these are like classic evils.
Oh, absolutely.
Of mankind.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the universe, but we'll say mankind. These are classic high level concepts of and they've been thrown around before in the past in various forms. Whether it be, movies or, literature and so on and so forth. But basically, I felt like, they were very CG.
Yeah.
I felt it was very hard to connect with their power or their fear or their characterizations. They were just very CG. In all honesty, they reminded me very much of demons that I've seen in like I think in the Ghostbuster movies.
Oh yeah, I mean the two demon dogs in Ghostbusters, especially in the statue form because they have these glowing red eyes.
Yeah,
they look very much like that. And even when you're in the Rock of Eternity, you see the seven deadly sins, and they're in statue form, but they're red. Their eyes glow red.
And I'll be honest with you,
I
would think that I almost want to say that those characterizations in the original Ghostbusters movies were influential to the look and feel that they had.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't consider that to be just incidental. Or,
I agree with you. I think I don't consider that coincidence. I think the director's name is it's Andy. Oh God, that's Sandberg.
No clue.
Yeah, it's Andy something. But I would love to hear his take on where that came from because I wouldn't be surprised if it came from there.
There was a certain influence in there. But ultimately, what you have is that the finale is it just. Like I said, the movie is a little tongue-in-cheek, a little comical, but at the end of the day, you have a finale of, the seven deadly sins
it's like, this is
running around a Christmas carnival and
but this plays on the tongue. This plays on the tongue-in-cheek part.
You're talking about like major, almost like what you would almost consider in other movies like demons. Significant.
No, absolutely.
And instead what they're doing is they're dangling, people from a Ferris wheel. Yeah. And it's like, okay, it's not quite as serious.
But see, I think this is where the boardroom scene is so different.
On the other side of that,
because the boardroom scene, they seem so menacing and that they're unstoppable. And then you get to the carnival scene, and they are is that ethereal? What is that? When you can't touch them?
Ephemeral?
What's that like when? So basically, you go to. So at that point, Shazam goes to touch them, and they basically turn into like air. They turn into like a cloud. So you can't. Is it ethereal? Is that? I can't.
Ethereal.
Ethereal. Thank you. Ethereal. Excuse me. Yeah. So he basically goes right through them, and the seven deadly sins can do this pretty much at will. And then there's a final showdown where it's Savannah holding the staff of Shazam, of the wizard, with the seven deadly sins around him, and they all go back into Savannah because at this point he believes that Shazam is going to transfer the power into him because he was going to kill off his foster brothers and sisters. Yeah. So at this point, Shazam has a revelation as to what the wizard was doing about his full potential and about his good heart and how he could open up his heart to people, to others. Yeah. And then he grabs the staff away from Savannah and tells all of his brothers and sisters, okay, all hands on deck. So everyone grabs hold. One of my favorite parts of the film, say my name. And what do they say? Billy. I thought
and he's like, no, the other name that I can't say.
Yeah, the name that I say to get it to this guy. And then they all say Shazam. And then we get the Shazam, or I guess now the Shazam family, which was the Marvel family, for all these characters. And then we get to see all of them kind of play out.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll be honest with you. I don't know that I saw that coming. I don't know that I saw all of the foster brothers and sisters becoming various versions of Shazam.
I knew that this was
I was actually surprised. Not that I was surprised, because I knew the original Captain Marvel had an extended family, but I didn't know they were going to go that route. So when they all turned into various Shazams, I was like, oh wow, that was cool.
I
enjoyed that.
I had this ruined for me when I went to Target with one of my sons to grab something, because down the toy aisle they had the characters in their Shazam form and their superhero form.
Yeah, so I didn't see that.
So unfortunately, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I guess they're going to turn into the heroes. So that unfortunately was spoiled. But even if I didn't see that, knowing that he had this family in the comics, they all turn into a superhero at some point where Shazam can kind of they can borrow his power to a degree. I thought that was going to happen. If it didn't happen in this film, I knew it would happen in the second film.
And I'm assuming they are planning on doing franchise.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, ultimately, they...
not for nothing. Even if they weren't planning on doing franchise, I think with the success of this film, it would be like, well, we just got to do another one.
Well, I mean, they set it up in the first mid-credit scene. So, this was a great Easter egg at the very beginning of the film when Savannah goes into the Rock of Eternity. There's a container, a dome glass, that contains what's it, like a caterpillar almost that
it
looks like?
It looks like a caterpillar.
But it's Mr. Mind,
who is in my opinion, one of the classic, iconic Captain Marvel.
Yep, that's an arch villain of his.
Which is a little hard to sell because
it's a talking caterpillar.
A talking caterpillar.
Right, but he is a very powerful villain. I think,
and those are the types of villains you could get away with in the 40s.
Right, and now it shows up in this film. So at some point you see when Billy Batson comes in, they re-show the dome glass and it's broken, and Mr. Mind is gone, and you don't see him again until the very end of the film in the mid-credits scene where Savannah's in jail, and then Mr. Mind starts to talk to him. So at some point these guys are hooking up in the next film.
And I can guarantee you, 99% of the people in the film, watching this movie,
had no
sitting there going,
"What's this thing?
What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, Captain Marvel in the 40s was not Marvel or Timely or DC. It was Fawcett. And Fawcett didn't extend to today.
No.
So I'm sure there are people still alive today that have read the original Captain Marvel comic books, but they didn't really survive in reprints. So unless you know a lot about comic books, you're gonna have no idea. You've never even heard of
Mr. Mind, but he's been a villain in
Mr. Mind, or you've never even heard of Savannah. Unless there have been reincarnations of them in DC.
They definitely brought them into the fold in DC.
Yeah.
But there is the only other villain that I would really love to see, and I think both John and I will agree, is Black Adam. There is a small hint at Black Adam when the Wizard Shazam is talking to Billy Batson, and he talks about choosing a champion, and how at one point they chose a champion, but they chose poorly, and that this champion turned on them and released the 7 deadly sins. That was Black Adam.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if you caught that.
No,
or not.
I didn't.
But the scene I'm talking about, right? When he has that whole light show, and he shows that illustration. So that is definitely Black Adam. I was really hoping for some type of Easter egg to Kahndaq or something hinting towards Black Adam. We didn't get that. No Rock special appearance, unfortunately.
Right.
But one of my favorite parts of this film is the ending. When Freddy tells these two bullies that have been bullying him throughout the whole film that he's friends with Shazam.
Oh, okay.
And that, I'm going to have him to lunch. He's my buddy, blah, blah. And they all yeah, sure. So lunch comes and goes. And Shazam, he doesn't show up because Freddy and Billy they're kind of in an argument. So all the kids make fun of him, and Freddy just ends up still becoming this kid that nobody pays attention to. So at the end of the film, Freddy goes and sits down at this table, and whatever kids were sitting there basically get up and leave.
Right.
But his foster family all starts coming around, and they all sit next to him, except Billy's not there. And then all of a sudden you hear Shazam's voice talking, and all the kids start looking and gasping. And Shazam's coming out and basically saying, he talks about Freddy. He's like, "Oh, this guy told me everything I know about being a superhero. He's the greatest." So he sits down right next to him and starts having lunch, and he looks at Freddy and he goes, "I hope you don't mind, I brought a friend along." And then the camera pans over,
and they show Superman.
You see Superman
from the neck down.
From the neck down. So I see the suit, and it's the suit from the DC film universe. Okay, so this is the Man of Steel suit through Justice League, and I'm half hoping we're gonna see him sit down, and it's gonna pan up to Henry Cavill, and it doesn't. It's literally.
It's a
tease. Superman stands next to Freddy, and Freddy looks up at him and just is in awe and gasps, and that's the end of the film. Yeah. So unfortunately, there is no Henry Cavill in this, although that was the cameo that they wanted him to play before the whole contract negotiation stuff went on.
So it is. Even though they do make references to the other superheroes in the DC universe, and even the newspapers and stuff.
Yes.
So. Right, here it is definitely clear that this movie takes place within the DC universe, Marvel continuity. Movie continuity.
100%.
But it is kind of funny because this movie, Superman takes place in Metropolis,
right?
And the Batman movie takes place in Gotham. This movie takes place in Philadelphia. which is actually kind of funny.
But Fawcett,
like, but nothing ever takes place in Philadelphia.
Which I guess Fawcett is like a town or suburb in Philadelphia.
Could be. So incidentally, it is kind of funny how they do kind of bring some of Philly flavor into the film.
Oh yeah, they talk about Rocky.
They talk about the steps, and where that is, where Rocky ran up, which is actually kind of funny. They even have a mention of Gino's Steaks.
Yes,
which is one of the famous cheesesteak places in Philly. Pat's and Gino's are directly across from each other, and if you want my opinion on who's better, it's tough. I think Pat's make. It's tough. I've been to both. I think I got to go with Gino's. Pat's is a bigger, messier sandwich. Gino's is a neater sandwich, but it works better. But that was interesting.
Now they also have they've got the love sign that gets smashed from the statue head.
Oh, I don't know.
During the fight scene, so the City of Brotherly Love, right? So don't you remember during the fight scene with Savannah and Shazam towards when they're in the city fighting at night? Savannah shoots lightning at Shazam when he dives away, and it hits the statue, and it pops the head off, and the head drops onto the love sign and smashes it to pieces.
That's kind of funny because maybe that's a landmark in Philadelphia. I'm not familiar with, so I don't think it registered with me.
Okay. But I mean, overall, that was pretty. Now, the second after credit scene is a lot of fun too because they're in that. It looks, Shazam is in Freddy's bedroom, and he's got this fish bowl in front of him. He's talking to the fish, and then you see Freddy like drop the pad on it, and I think it says something like telecommunications or something like that, like on his clipboard, like whatever superpower that he had written down.
Yeah, he doesn't have that.
He doesn't have that, right? And he's like, and Shazam's just like, it's like, what? How is this cool? Like, how is talking to fish cool? What can I do with this? And Freddy's wearing an Aquaman T-shirt, and he's like, I don't know, control like maybe billions of fish in the sea. In the ocean?
Which I think always goes back to the original joke about Aquaman and the Super Friends.
Right, like what's fun about that? Yeah, like how is that cool?
The lamest superhero.
Right. But I think the Aquaman movie showed quite the contrary. But I thought that was pretty funny. So, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed this film. I think you can tell from our conversation about this. Mm-hmm. I had a couple of issues with it, I think, but very, very small.
There was one very convenient plot device that they used is when Mary was the person crossing the street about to get hit by a car.
Yes.
And Captain Marvel saved her. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And they had some sort of conversation that kind of played into their characters and it was referenced later. And I'm like, okay, that was very convenient.
That it's her walking across the street.
That Shazam, saved Mary.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, in my opinion, little too convenient, but in this type of movie, I let that slide.
And of course, this is where, and then later on, there's a discovery as to that Billy is Shazam by the foster kids. And then, of course, Darla is like, yay, you figured it out. I didn't have to tell you.
And that was actually really funny. And what's really funny is, I guarantee you, when I re-listen to this entire episode, I guarantee you there's going to be instances where instead of saying Shazam, I've said Captain Marvel.
You've said it multiple times.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, like,
but to us who've known the character for so many years, it's interchangeable because that's what they were.
Yeah, I mean, I knew about Captain Marvel, the big cheese, before I was even 10. Well, I've known about this character from the 70s.
We talked about this when we did the trailer review. For people that are unaware of this. Shazam was the name of the wizard and the wizard only, and it was just the word that Billy would say to turn into Captain Marvel. Yeah. But once the New 52 hit, that went away, and it was just Shazam, and that's it.
So interesting sidebar. Back in the 70s, when I was reading Captain Marvel comics, I remember telling one of my friend's moms
the Marvel Comics
version of Captain Marvel. I remember, this is literally like 1977. I remember talking to one of my friend's moms about this really cool Captain Marvel comic. And when Captain Marvel, slams his hands together as negabands, he becomes Rick Jones. And I remember my friends, and this is my friend Kevin O'Shea's mom, Miss O'Shea, looking at me going like, what are you talking about? Captain Marvel turns into Billy Batson. And I'm going, I have no idea who the hell she's talking about. Who the hell is Billy Batson? You know? But then, like, within a short amount of, because that was literally the first year I was reading comics. Within a short amount of time, I figured out what she was talking about. And at the end of the day, as with everything, it's a generational.
Yeah. And I just think it's great that these two films both came out a month apart from one another. I think that's just so interesting. And probably
still, like, again, in Sayville, Captain Marvel was playing, and then they replaced, and they got rid of it.
And they just literally changed it over.
But I guarantee you, Captain Marvel and Shazam are both playing in theaters right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt.
But, I mean, I think with that, guys, I think you pretty much understand where we're at with our review. Yeah. I really enjoyed the film. I've seen it twice. Too.
And I'll be honest with you, I was expecting to go into the film a little bit like it was. I felt the film was going to be goofy to the point of it was going to detract from my experience.
Yeah.
And basically, I went in and I got past all the goofiness pretty fast because how are they presenting it? As long as they're presenting it that way, it's fine. And I think I kind of went into cruise control a little bit, turned my brain off a little bit, and enjoyed the film for what it was and what it was meant to be.
Absolutely.
They weren't going for high art, high concept, high storyline. They were going for, basically just fun.
They went for fun, and I'll even say enjoyable, because it really was. Like, this was such an enjoyable film. It had a lot of heart behind it. I think if you didn't have some of those siblings in the parts that they played, I think that would have taken away from it a little bit. But the fact that those, like, the kids' interactions was, I think, a big part of this film.
And there was enough of them.
And it was enough of that it was a different interaction and just made it enjoyable. It really did. It wasn't just a straight up, Shazam versus Savannah. There was multiple layers to this film.
And the foster parents were good too.
Yeah. I don't want to take that away from it.
We were surprised to see the foster parent father is
from Walking Dead.
Is from The Walking Dead.
Yeah, from the Kingdom. And both of them, like, you can see how much they love these kids. Both being foster children themselves, as they say in the film. And it's just nice to see at the end of the film that Billy does feel like he's a part of this family, and he starts to take that role on. And I think you really see that progression, I think, throughout the film.
Yeah,
I really did. I enjoyed
and if they do a sequel, I do anticipate that the whole foster family is going to be part of that. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing those characters back.
Yep.
I definitely am.
Yep. So last interesting sidebar. So two characters in the Shazam film, both I think it's DJ Crona and or Controna, whatever his name is. He played Pedro's superhero self, and Adam Brody, who played the superhero version of Freddy. Those two characters were both in the scrapped Justice League film that was in the late 2000s.
Really?
Yeah. So a little sidebar.
Who knew?
A little bit of information. But I think with that, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. So This is Johnny Mo. I'm Goody. I hope you guys enjoyed. So please subscribe, like, comment, and share this with anybody who loves these types of films.
Yeah. And if you're watching us for the first time, feel free to go back and watch some of our earlier episodes. And,
Absolutely.
I think you'll enjoy them.
So guys, thank you much again.
Yep.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, right?
Take care.
See you next time.